Back in some towns and cities close to the capital, one witness has told Al Jazeera more than 100 people were killed in Az-Zawiya, 50 kilometres west of Tripoli. Meanwhile, officers from the Bayan airbase in Benghazi have sent us a video explaining that they have now left the regime and are supporting the protesters.
I, Colonel Pilot Hussein Watfali, commander of Helicopter Squadron at Benin Air Base, announce in this solemn moment that we are joining the revolution, joining the rebelling people of February 17th. The majority of personnel in the base, including officers, commissioned officers and enlisted conscripts, are joined by civilians inside the base. We will die defending our country, the homeland Libya. Long live the revolution. Long live the February 17th youth. Long live free Libya.
And many of Libya's tribal leaders have gathered in Al Baida in the country's east, and they've called for an end to Gaddafi's 40-year rule. Anti-government protesters seized control of that city on Friday after they were joined by the local police. Now, rescuers in New Zealand are losing hope of finding any more survivors from the earthquake that hit the city of Christchurch. A government minister says the death toll is now 102 and more than 220 people are still listed as missing. More than 24 hours have passed without any further signs of life under the rubble. Those are the main stories. The news continues after Inside Story.
The protests in Libya are continuing, and the Libyan leader Colonel Muammar Gaddafi is struggling to hold on to power. Many parts of the country under the control of pro-reform protesters, many now fearing a violent showdown. But in a country divided by tribes, alliances and clans, it is difficult to draw the outlines of a future battle. Who exactly are the groups that are holding the future of the country in their hands? And how long can the Libyan leaders survive? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anand Naidu. Let's start by taking a look at Libya's military. The army makes up 2/3 of Libya's military, but it's largely a symbolic force, numbering around 50,000. They're not very well trained or equipped. In fact, Gaddafi has tried to keep the military divided in order to prevent a coup, which is how he himself came to power in 1969. It's highly unlikely that changes in the conventional military allegiance would affect him. Most observers feel they hold only limited power. Instead, ultimate power lies in the hands of a network of paramilitary entities, estimated at around 40,000, the so-called People's Militia. It reports to Gaddafi's revolutionary committees. Then there is the Revolutionary Guard, a roughly 3,000-strong elite corps responsible for the regime's and Gaddafi's security. Add internal security. The regime has used this force to repress dissent and the growth of the opposition. Then there are the tribes. It's believed that the three largest and influential tribes in Libya are the Ben Salim tribe in Cyrenaica, Beni Hilal in western Libya, and the Magarha tribe, which has the strongest ties to Gaddafi. And finally, there are the mercenaries. Gaddafi's regime has been making extensive use of hired African mercenaries, mostly from Chad and Niger, to carry out atrocities against the protesters. Of all the armed groups, these are the least likely to switch support. But if any of these entities ultimately change sides and join the protesters, it would seriously undermine Gaddafi's ability to survive. To discuss this, we are joined by three guests. From London, Faraj Najam. He's the author of Tribes, Islam and State in Libya. Also from London, Alia Brahimi. She's a research fellow at the London School of Economics. And joining us via broadband from Washington, D.C., Rashid Kikir. He is a member of the Libyan Conference of the National Opposition. Welcome to all of you to the program. Alia Brahimi, let me start with you. At this stage, it looks like large parts of the country are now in the hands of the opposition, especially those parts of the country in the east, and the protests are continuing in Tripoli. So, at this stage, which of all these myriad forces that exist in Libya would Colonel Gaddafi be turning to maintain power in the country and, of course, to protect himself and his family?
I think think Gaddafi will be turning to the elite guard, elite revolutionary guard that he's always relied on. This is a highly ideological guard, but it's also a network of militias that actually have thrown their lot in with Gaddafi, politically and economically, and will in many senses be fighting for their own lives. So I think he's going to rely once more on these militias, and as you mentioned in the introductory segment, much less so on the army, which he's never historically held much faith in, and in actual fact seems to have deliberately weakened in order to prevent any form of rival base which might emerge to challenge him. So I think in the first place he'll be relying on his militias, and in the second place I think he'll count on the loyalty of parts of his tribe who for the same reason, who have also thrown their lot in with the regime and who are identified with Gaddafi's rule and who have a lot to lose if Gaddafi was to be ousted from power.
Now, when you talk about the militias and his tribe, are they one and the same?
Not necessarily, not as far as we know, but in actual fact, some of the key security posts are thought to be staffed by members of his own tribe. But his sons actually, and I think we mustn't dwell too much on tribes. Of course, there have been some prominent defections, such as the Warfalla tribe of 1 million people almost. But the point is the reasons they gave, which were about Islamic ethics, about morality, and about their inability to continue an alliance with Gaddafi while he turns the instruments of the state against his own people. So I think there's potential for individuals or for subclans to make that judgment themselves. I don't think it's necessarily a tribal pattern we'll see. But there's also the element of his family, and we know that his son Khamis, who's done very well in the security forces, that's how he's defined himself, he seems to be in charge of a brigade known as the 32nd Brigade, or sometimes I've heard the 2nd Brigade, of 6,000 to 8,000 men. Right,
I want to get to the family breakdown in just a moment, but let's go to Faraj Najam, who's in London. Mr. Najam, the Libyan leader has done something which neither the Egyptian leader nor the Tunisian leader, who both, of course, lost power, did, and that is use his air force against civilians. Now, who would be staffing that air force, and who would have made that decision to unleash the air force and strafe civilians during these demonstrations?
Well, these pilots, some of them obviously are ideologue, but also loyal to the regime, and some of them are fellow tribesmen to Gaddafi. We know that some of them have awakened conscious, and the like of those 2 airplanes which just fell just near Jabalia. One of them has the same surname as Gaddafi, so one of them just felt, you know, this is not right, and he didn't do it. He just let his airplane fall down, and he jumped out of it. But there will be pilots from all over Libya, professional, but there are some hardcore, committed thugs who would be willing to do just that for him.
You say there are some who are hardcore, who would have undivided loyalty, but does that mean that there are some whose loyalty cannot be counted upon, that they could easily fly? Well, we have seen some of them fly their jets out of the country into other countries.
Yes, well, the majority have